Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and in this video I'm gonna take a look at the Panasonic Leica 25mm f1.4 Mark II lens. This lens, mounted on my G90 at the moment, is a fast standard lens for micro four thirds cameras. It's an slightly improved version of the Mark I that came out in 2011. And this new version of the Panasonic Leica 25mm f1.4 came out very silently last August in 2019. Panasonic did not make a big fuss about this lens in last August when this lens came out. But I think it's an important lens, an important improvement, because the Mark I lens that I also have here is a favorite of many photographers, and one of the biggest complaints about the Mark I is the lack of weather sealing. And one of the most important improvements on the new lens is the weather sealing. There's also something new with the autofocus. Let me read what the original press release from last August says. It says, "Focus drive system and stepping motor capable of smooth silent operation to work with camera's high-speed autofocus system. It's also capable with the sensor drive maximum 240 frames per second to take maximum advantage of camera's high-speed autofocus system." So it makes me believe that they also did something with the autofocus. But we're gonna see about that in a moment when I talk about the lens and how it performs. But let's first take a look at both lenses side by side. And as we can see, they look very similar, if not almost identical. The letterings on the side of the lens are a little bit different on both lenses, and the markings around the front element are exactly the same, so it's kind of hard to tell these lenses apart. But there is a silver or chrome ring around the front of the lens on the Mark I, and that's probably the easiest way to tell these apart. And if you look around the mount, there's a rubber seal around the mount on the Mark II, obviously because of the weather sealing. However, the optical design on both lenses is exactly the same, and I think it's very good, and I'll talk about that in a bit. The build quality is still the same premium that it was on the Mark I version. I had nothing to complain about the Mark I either, and the Mark II feels exactly the same. The exterior is mostly plastic, but it still feels high quality, and all in all the lens has a very solid feeling. This lens weighs just over 200 grams and the filter size is 46mm. It's not the smallest or lightest micro four thirds lens, but it's still reasonably compact. And the balance on most micro four thirds cameras is really good and comfortable. It feels just about the right size for most micro four thirds cameras. But if you mount this lens on one of the very small cameras like the Lumix GX880, it feels a little bit too big on such a small camera body. But on the G90, for example, or on the G9, it feels like pretty much perfect size and weight. The balance is really good. This lens also comes with a lens hood, which is very good, but I wish they would have redesigned the lens hood while they were improving the lens. I wish I could reverse mount the lens hood while I'm transporting my camera or lens in my camera bag, but I can't do it. And the standard lens hood is quite big, so it kind of makes the situation even worse. I'm a big proponent of lens hoods, but this design is not the best. However, there's a solution. I've been using the lens hood from the 45mm f2.8 macro. It's a perfect fit and it's more compact. And I think it protects the front element just enough, even though it's not as deep as the original lens hood. And it's also small enough so I don't have to remove the hood when I'm transporting the camera or the lens. And like I already said, the optical construction is exactly the same as on the Mark I. There are 9 elements in 7 groups, including 2 aspherical elements and one ultra-high refractive lens element. So compared to many new lenses, the optical construction is relatively simple. Many new standard lenses can have like 12 or even 15 lens elements inside of them, and the construction is much more complex than this one. The minimum focusing distance is 30 centimeters, which is quite normal for a standard lens. This lens doesn't have any special close focus capabilities, but 30 centimeters is quite good for occasional close-ups. There's no optical stabilizer built into this lens, which is fine. Most current Lumix camera bodies have a really effective in-body stabilizer. At this point, let me show you some test shots I made on this lens. It's been a bit of a challenge to make any test pictures outside lately because of the virus and the global situation. It's not forbidden to go out here in Finland yet, at least, but I'd like to be a proper citizen and not go out unless I absolutely have to. However, I still have some pictures I shot outside a few days ago, and this is all black and white because I've been feeling very like monochromatic lately because of the global situation and the virus and all that. At least I think it's because of that. But let's take a look at the pictures, and then I'll talk about the sharpness and the optical performance and the performance of the lens in general.
Another day to live another fairy tale.
Please also remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, and also sign up for my monthly newsletter. There's a link in the description, but you can also go to my website sulanto.fi. I also have some merchandise for sale. There's a link in the description. There are some cool t-shirts and hoodies that you might like. Please check it out. The optical performance of this lens is similar to the Mark I because the optical construction is also the same. And I think it's really good they didn't change the optical construction and the optical performance. I like the way this lens performs. Some people have been complaining that this lens is not sharp enough and the corners are not sharp, but I kind of disagree. This lens has almost like a double character. Wide open, it's sharp in the middle of the picture or the middle of the frame, but the edges go a little bit soft, wide open. Not like mushy soft, but a little bit soft. But when you stop down to about f2.8, the lens gets nice and sharp across the frame and stays that way until about f8, after which the diffraction starts to soften the image. And this lens is not a pixel peeper's lens. It's a photographer's lens. It's a lens for those who can appreciate beautiful pictures and who are not obsessed about the sharpness. Because I've said it many times before, photography is not about sharpness. It's about light and shadow composition, telling stories with pictures, and sharpness has almost nothing to do with that. But anyway, this lens is plenty sharp for everything I shoot. And if you are a photographer and you appreciate beautiful looking pictures, then I think you're gonna like this lens a lot. But if you're a pixel peeper and you appreciate the maximum corner sharpness, wide open, I think this is not your lens and it's a good idea to look elsewhere. There is a fair bit of vignetting happening wide open, but it mostly disappears already at f2, and when you stop down a little bit further to about f2.8, the vignetting is pretty much gone. And I personally, I don't mind about some vignetting. I actually like it and I often add it to my pictures later. So I think the vignetting behavior of this lens quite pleases me. This lens has one downside though, and it's the longitudinal chromatic aberration, also called bokeh fringing. At wide open or at wide apertures, it's quite pronounced. You can get rid of most of it in Lightroom, for example, in post-processing, but some of it can still be visible even if you try to get rid of it. In black and white pictures, it's not a problem, of course, but in color pictures, it can be, depending on what you shoot. For me personally, it's not such a big deal, but it's there, and if you don't like it, it can be disturbing. The autofocus is really fast and silent. But to be honest, at least in photography, I didn't notice much difference between the Mark I and the Mark II. Some users of the Mark I version are complaining about the rattling noise. First of all, the rattling noise doesn't come from the autofocus, it comes from the aperture mechanism. But to be honest, I can't hear any rattling noise from either of these lenses when I mount them on any of my camera bodies. So I'm thinking maybe the rattling noise is more of an issue when you mount the Mark I version on Olympus camera body or maybe on some of the older Lumix camera bodies. And what comes to the new lens, I haven't been able to try it on any Olympus camera, so I can't comment anything on that. But at least when I mount the Mark I or the Mark II version on any of my cameras, I can't hear any rattling noise. Sometimes I think that some of the latest lens designs are almost boring because they are so perfect. And don't get me wrong, I can appreciate good optical design, but sometimes I also want to have something that has a bit more character. And this Leica 25mm f1.4 has character. This lens is almost like a vintage lens and a modern lens in the same package. And that makes this lens unique in the whole Micro Four Thirds lineup, I think. And it's good that we have this option. For those of us who don't always want to have pin-sharp corner-to-corner pictures, for those of us who want to have something else at least sometimes. And my conclusion with this lens is that it's still an excellent standard lens for any Micro Four Thirds camera. It makes beautiful pictures and it's weather sealed, it's sharp and it's compact and it's well built. However, it's good to realize that if you are an obsessive pixel peeper, then this may not be your lens. But if you are a photographer who appreciates beautiful pictures, I think you're gonna like this lens. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.